well, we're looking at Iran again, but what's obviously Netanyahu was meeting Trump in the last day or two. So what were they saying?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to play this excerpt from the meeting, or rather the press conference between Trump and Netanyahu, which was what Trump said on the upcoming Iran meeting. So let's just roll this.
Wait. We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. And the obvious is not something that I want to be involved with, or frankly, that Israel wants to be involved with if they can avoid it. So we're going to see if we can avoid it. But it's getting to be very dangerous territory. And hopefully those talks will be successful. And I think it would be in Iran's best interest if they are successful. We hope that's going to happen.
So here Trump basically is saying, despite the reports saying that these talks would be indirect talks, in other words, they would be overseen or moderated, let's say, by Oman, he's now saying they're direct talks with his envoy, Stephen Witkoff. And Reuters picked this up, said Trump says US-Iran set for direct nuclear talks. Tehran says that they will be indirect, and in fact, the Iranian foreign minister went on X immediately after to basically point out that as far as he's concerned, if we can just put the tweet up, Iran and the United States will meet in Oman on Saturday for indirect high-level talks. It is as much an opportunity as it is a test. The ball is in America's court. Interesting that everybody seems to be using the ball in the court analogies, including, of course, the United States and Trump over the Russian-Ukraine negotiations. But I think for me, what this signals is America is basically setting Iran up for failure by Trump saying this will be a direct talk, by Iran basically saying, no, we maintain that they should be indirect talks. There is potential, of course, for the United States and its slavish media to basically portray Iran as being obstructive, even prior to the talk. So we'll wait and see. And that, of course, in the context of the previous reports suggesting Iran's weakness in the region and the weakness of its allies that are under threat, but are certainly not as weak as they're being portrayed by Trump and Western media. So we will see what happens on Saturday.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much, Vanessa. Now, Dan Kleiman was who the crowdfunder was for. I do apologize, Dan. I'm very sorry about that. I'm very embarrassed. But there we go. We will move on. And Vanessa, what's going on? Escalation happening in the region?
Yeah, definitely. It looks like some kind of escalation, but I would also say it's very much about fake news, both in the UK, the EU, and the US, to try and portray Iran as severely weakened prior to the indirect or direct, according to Trump, talks that are going to take place in Oman on Saturday. So let's have a quick look at a few of the reports that have been coming out in the last few days. So first of all, there was a claim, and actually this was in the Telegraph, Iran abandons Houthis under relentless US bombardment. This was a claim that Iranian advisors were fleeing Yemen under the US heavy bombardment, which of course has been denied both by Ansarullah in Yemen and by Iran itself. And of course, the fact is that while Trump is claiming that the US aggression has basically beaten Ansarullah back, of course it hasn't. The missiles are still coming both towards the occupied territories of Palestine and towards US and Israeli shipping in the Red Sea. Then this report came out again very recently. Iran-backed Iraqi militias consider disarming amid threats from the Trump administration. Again, this is denied, but it was picked up by, let's say, soft Zionist media in Haaretz, which we can have a look at that report. Again, it talks about with disarmament of militias in Iraq, Iran signals a major strategic shift. It's saying that pro-Iranian militias, of course, again, describing them almost as proxies of Iran, which is untrue, have agreed to disarm, but it doesn't necessarily indicate a weakening of Iran's power in Iraq, but does point to Tehran recalibrating its strategy following the blows to its ring of fire, which of course include Lebanon, Palestine, and the international coup in Syria last December. So effectively, what it's trying to say is that Iran is in a weakened position. It's prepared to compromise during the talks on Saturday in Oman. This is an article, again, in what I would call as a sort of soft, centrist Israeli media. As reconstruction stalls in Lebanon, victims of Israeli strikes, which was during the previous war between Hezbollah and Israel, say they won't bow to US pressure to normalize with Israel. So what is the US trying to do? It's trying to withhold funding for the reconstruction of the south, and that includes the southern suburbs of Beirut, through the IMF and the World Bank, which of course is a very typical strategy of the United States. On the 6th of April, the US envoy Morgan Otargis came to Lebanon, and of course she is pushing for the full disarmament of Hezbollah, again using the threats that IMF and World Bank won't put any funding into the rebuilding of Lebanon, but also threatening that the US will withdraw from the Oversight Committee, which effectively will give Israel full freedom to act in the south without any kind of calibration by the United States. Next, false report. Hezbollah is apparently ready for disarmament talks if Israel withdraws from South Lebanon. Well, Israel should have already withdrawn under the original ceasefire agreement. And in reality, what this is trying to do is to go for not only the withdrawal of Hezbollah from the southern region to the north of the Litani River, which is part of the UN Resolution 1701, which was part of the ceasefire agreement. But as I've mentioned, of course, Israel has maintained its presence, military presence, in 5 areas of the south, 5 strategic high areas from which it is on a regular basis attacking civilians in that area. But it's also been carrying out airstrikes on a regular basis, drone surveillance, drone strikes, drone assassination. So it's not at all holding to the ceasefire agreement. And then yesterday, this was a major report that came out in Saudi Arabian media. Of course, Saudi Arabia working regularly to reinforce a Zionist agenda in the region.
And it looks like we have lost Vanessa, unfortunately. So she'll be back in a second. But anyway, there is a final. You're back. No, you're not back.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Yes. Okay. Right. Sorry, you were talking about Iran's Al-Quds special forces use Beirut port to smuggle weapons for Hezbollah.
Yeah, which of course is clearly untrue, but it may signal an attack by Israel on the port itself. We could hear Israeli jets in the skies yesterday. And finally, there were reports on social media that there were special US representatives landed in Israel yesterday for talks, but also Ben Gvir, one of the most extremist members of Netanyahu's government, has embarked on an official visit to the US after being boycotted by Biden administration. So what we seem to be seeing is a buildup of stories to facilitate some kind of escalation, but also prior to the meeting on Saturday between Stephen Witkoff and the Iranian representatives.
Thank you for that. Well, more for the Middle East just after the ad break. So let's have a look at this. If you like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us, support.ukcolumn.org is the place to go, and you can join us. You can make a donation. You can join us as a member. These are 2 different things. If you want to watch UK Column News Extra, please make sure you join as a member, and there are various time periods that you can join over. You can pick something up from the UK Column shop, and we still have a few t-shirts from the event at the weekend, and those will be going up in the shop in the next day or 2. Or if you would like to get something from clivetokar.com, if you use the link on this page, we get a small commission on that. But if you can't do any of that, that's absolutely fine. But please do at least share the material you see on the UK Column website. And we prefer if you share content from the website rather than sharing stuff that's on the platforms. The share links are provided. And of course, you can use other platforms if you wish. Now, yesterday's interview, Thinking with Your Heart, this was yours, Charles?
It was indeed absolutely terrific. It's gone down really well. So I'd very much encourage you to get a good listen to Jonathan Marshall, who I met last year at a country show. He performs with an amazing stallion and falcons, but he addresses what he describes as the anti-nature agenda absolutely perfectly. And it's a really, really delightful and uplifting interview. So please do have a listen.
Thank you, Charles. And tomorrow at 1 p.m, Brian will be putting out the second part of his discussion with Karl Schwartz on 9/11. And so do join us at 1 p.m. for that if you possibly can. There is a Glasgow Peace Walk being run by Stand for Peace. It's taking place on the 12th of April, 2025 at 12 p.m, St. Enoch Square. Details on screen. The details will be in the show notes as well. Please get to that if you possibly can. And Diane has asked us to highlight this crowdfunder on Give, Send, Go for this is legal defense for SLAP suits against freedom of speech. This is sorry, Charles, can you remind me who this is? Because this has completely fallen out of my head.
I'm afraid to say I can't help. I don't know who that is, so I'm terribly sorry to everybody.
I do apologise. Well, I do apologise for that, as this is live and it's completely fallen out of my head. So anyway, the details will be in the show notes for that as well. So do please support that if you can. This is about what's going on in libraries and freedom of speech, defamation lawsuits, and all kinds of stuff around that in the United States. But nonetheless, it should be of importance to everybody. Vanessa, let me come back to you then, and Charles. Vanessa, let's finish off with you then. And more on the Trump and Netanyahu meeting. Don't worry about the time. Just take your time and do it.
Yes. So interesting that The Economist has actually just very recently published an article talking about Turkey and Israel are becoming deadly rivals in Syria. Of course, we've been talking about that at UK Column for some time now, a few months. Now, how The Economist frames it is very much that Israel fears that Hamas will end up in Syria and under the umbrella of Turkey. Turkey fears the relationship between Israel and the Kurdish factions in the northeast of Syria. But both of them are united over the common ground of keeping Iran and Iranian influence out of the region. Now, Netanyahu has been lobbying the US, in particular Marco Rubio, who's known to be one of the most ardent pro-Zionists in the administration, although the entire administration, I would argue, is pro-Israel, pro-Zionist. So he's been regularly calling Rubio to tell him to cancel the sales of F-35s to Turkey. And I just want to roll this section of the press conference between Netanyahu and Trump, where Trump covers the Turkey issue. So let's have a look at this.
And I told the Prime Minister, I said, just, Bibi, if you have a problem with Turkey, I really think I'm going to be able to work it out. You know, I have a very, very good relationship with Turkey and with their leader, and I think we'll be able to work it out. So I hope that's not going to be a problem. I don't think it will be a problem. Now, with that being said, I believe it was Turkey, and I said that to him. I said it. I said, congratulations. You've done what nobody's been able to do in 2,000 years. You've taken over Syria with different names, but same thing. I said, you've taken it over. He's taken it over through surrogates. He goes, no, it was not me. I said, it was you. But that's okay. You don't have to say, well, it sort of maybe was me. Okay. But what he did, he's a tough guy and he's very smart. And he did something that nobody was able to do. You know, you got to hand it to him. Any problem that you have with Turkey, I think I can solve.
Now, what's interesting here is that Trump is actually laying the blame for the international coup that finally toppled the Syrian government after 14 years of regime change, which was backed by the US, the UK, the EU, the Gulf states, Israel. And suddenly it all becomes Turkey's problem. That's one aspect of this. The other thing, of course, is that Trump is pushing for deconfliction. In other words, I think what he's pushing for, because his attitude towards Israel, in my opinion, would be favorable to that of his attitude towards Turkey, even though Turkey is a NATO member state. And what's interesting is the slight change in rhetoric from Turkey, not since the meeting, but just leading up to that meeting. And of course, we can assume that there were back-channel conversations going on with Turkey. So let's have a look at what Mr. Fidan, the Turkish foreign minister, has said. So he's basically saying the bottom section.
Unfortunately, Israel is taking one by one out of all these capabilities that the new state can use against ISIS and other terrorist threats.
Yeah, so basically, of course, what they're referring to is Israel's bombing of the T4 airport in Palmyra and also Hama to the south of Idlib. So they're basically making the claim that they're only installing air defense and military capabilities for Giuliani's government in Damascus in order to combat ISIS. Well, I mean, where have we heard that one before? And he says it again here, basically. Sorry, Mike, if you can just read that for me again, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, it says, so basically what Israel is doing in Syria is not only threatening the security of Syria, but also paving the way for future instability of the region. I don't think that it's good for Israel's future in the region.
Yeah, so again, we have here Turkey using the combating ISIS card, which again was used for years by the West, while of course ISIS is a proxy of the West inside Syria. So now Turkey and Israel mull a deconfliction line in Syria. So again, this is post the Trump press conference. So Trump is clearly, in my opinion, putting pressure on Turkey to back down and basically retreat behind an agreed line, which doesn't appear to yet have been finalized. But I just wanted to show here why this area in particular is so important. So I've put in a circle there, basically the area that Israel has been intensively bombing, that Turkey was planning to move forward with air defense and military capability in order to allegedly combat ISIS. But look how close that entire circle of military air bases is to the potential of Israel's expansion up that eastern corridor. So the last thing that Israel wants is a Turkish expansionism into that central Syrian area. And of course, again, just to remind everybody, Israel is looking to partition Syria. Turkey is looking to maintain a so-called unified Syria under Turkish control. And one interesting point that I just wanted to make, this actually came out in Newsweek, and it's talking about Syria's new resistance. There are a number of resistance factions forming in Syria since the international coup in December last year. But this is a fairly interesting and in-depth article on the formation of what is known as Uli al-Bas, which is effectively claiming to represent a segment of the population in southern Syria to combat Israeli expansionism in the south of Syria, which of course has been ongoing since December the 8th. So again, interesting regional developments, but the potential for conflict to some degree between Turkey and Israel is definitely still there, with the US, Trump showing that he wants to act as arbiter in that potential confrontation.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Well, we've got to leave it there for today. I'm going to say thank you very much to Vanessa, Charles, and Sandy for joining me today. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back in a few minutes for UK Column News Extra if you're a UK Column member. I won't be back for 2 weeks. I'm off on holiday, so I hope everyone has fun while I'm away. But join us for Extra in a couple of minutes if you're a member. And we'll see you on, or at least Patrick and Charles will see you on Friday as usual. See you then. Bye-bye.